Hello, beautiful damsels. Threaten me? That's cute. Watch me not care. There's a hard truth most people refuse to accept. You cannot control someone who doesn't fear loss. And if there's one thing a Sigma female has mastered, it's the art of living without attachments that can be used against her. She doesn't flinch at ultimatums, doesn't break under pressure, and doesn't beg for acceptance. Try to cage her, and she won't fight. She'll simply walk out and never look back. Here's a fact. Studies show that people who are highly independent and self-sufficient are the least susceptible to manipulation. The Sigma female embodies this to the extreme. She doesn't just avoid control, she's immune to it. The problem? The world isn't used to women who can't be pressured, coerced, or emotionally blackmailed. And that's where things get interesting. When traditional tactics fail, when threats, guilt trips, and social games crumble, you get to witness something rare, the moment a manipulator realizes they have no power. And trust me, it's hilarious. Number 1. You weren't a threat, you were a test. A Sigma female never truly feels threatened. She sees manipulative behavior as a test of character. Every ultimatum, every guilt trip, every attempt to control her is nothing more than an unintentional audition. And most people fail spectacularly. She doesn't react the way they expect. Where others might panic, plead, or cave under pressure, she stays calm. She watches, she evaluates. She lets them talk, lets them reveal their true nature. And once they're done, she makes her decision, not out of emotion, but from cold, calculated logic. The moment someone resorts to threats, she knows exactly what she's dealing with. Insecurity wrapped in arrogance, control disguised as authority. People who threaten others expect resistance or submission, but a Sigma female gives them neither. She simply recognizes the game and refuses to play. There's no argument, no dramatic confrontation, just a quiet, effortless disengagement. It's not that she chooses to be unaffected, she is unaffected. A person trying to threaten her isn't intimidating. They're just showing their weakness. They're proving that they have nothing to offer beyond control tactics, and she has no use for that. The most brutal part? She doesn't warn them. She doesn't tell them they've failed the test. She just moves on, often without explanation. And nothing unsettles a manipulator more than realizing their threats have no impact, that their power was an illusion all along. By the time they realize what happened, she's already gone, mentally, emotionally, or even physically. No closure, no second chances. She gave them an opportunity to prove themselves, and they proved they weren't worth her time. That's not a loss for her. That's just another lesson in why most people don't deserve access to her world. Number 2, she's the judge, not the defendant. People who issue threats assume they're in control, that their words hold weight, that their approval is something to be feared losing. But a Sigma female doesn't operate on borrowed authority. She isn't the one on trial, she's the one making the judgment. By the time someone resorts to threats, she's already reached her verdict. They were never as powerful as they thought. She doesn't see threats as a sign of dominance. She sees them as proof of weakness. Strong people don't need to threaten. They command respect naturally. Only the insecure feel the need to dangle consequences over someone's head, hoping fear will keep them compliant. But fear only works on those who believe they have something to lose. A Sigma female doesn't. While they think they're intimidating her into submission, she's silently evaluating. She's watching how they react when they feel powerless, how desperate they become when their usual tactics fail. And when it becomes clear they have nothing real to offer, only control, manipulation, and empty authority, she makes her final decision. She doesn't fight. She doesn't argue. She doesn't explain herself. She simply decides that they are no longer worth her time. And once she makes that decision, there's no appeal, no second chance. They think they had the power. They never did. Number 3, threats only work on those afraid to lose. Threats only have power over those who fear the consequences. A Sigma female doesn't. She sees loss as a natural part of life, something to be accepted, not feared. So when someone tries to control her with threats of abandonment, punishment, or exclusion, she doesn't panic. She doesn't beg. She doesn't even flinch. She simply lets go. Most people cling to relationships, jobs, or social circles out of fear. Fear of being alone, fear of instability, fear of losing status. A Sigma female has already made peace with solitude, built her own stability, and rejected the need for external validation. That means threats hold no leverage over her. If someone says, "Do this or I'll leave," she's already holding the door open. If an employer tries, "Follow orders or you're fired," she's already planning her next move. If society says, "Conform or be cast out," she shrugs. She was never part of the herd to begin with. The mistake manipulators make is assuming she values attachment over autonomy. She doesn't. She values authenticity over forced loyalty. So when someone issues a threat, she doesn't see danger. She sees clarity. If a person feels the need to use threats, it means they were never secure in their own position to begin with. And if that's the case, why would she fight to keep them in her life? At the end of the day, she doesn't lose people. She releases them. And in doing so, she trims the dead weight, making more space for what actually matters: freedom, peace, and the power to move forward unburdened. Number 4, she's more dangerous when silent than when provoked. Silence is a language most people don't understand until it's too late. When a Sigma female stops talking, it isn't because she's at a loss for words, it's because she's already made up her mind. Unlike others who react impulsively, arguing, pleading, or trying to prove a point, she understands that silence is far more powerful than any outburst. People expect a reaction when they push too far. They expect tears, anger, maybe even a desperate attempt to fix things. But a Sigma female doesn't play by those rules. She absorbs everything, calculates her next step, and then, without warning, executes it with precision. There's no warning shot, no messy back and forth. By the time she's quiet, she's already removing herself from the equation. This is what makes her dangerous. Not in the reckless, impulsive way of someone who lashes out, but in the deliberate, methodical way of someone who only acts when the decision is final. She doesn't need to scream to be heard, doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. If she's silent, it means she's thinking, planning, and most importantly, detaching. And once she fully detaches, there's no reversing it. That's what makes her silence unsettling. When she's talking, you still have a chance. When she's arguing, she still cares enough to engage. But when she's silent, that's when you should be worried, because she's already moving forward, and you're not in the picture. Number 5. Attempts at domination are met with amusement, not resistance. Control only works on those who acknowledge it. A Sigma female doesn't resist dominance because she doesn't recognize it as a legitimate force in her world. She doesn't argue, doesn't push back, doesn't waste her energy trying to prove a point. Instead, she watches. And the more someone tries to assert control over her, the more absurd they become in her eyes. There's a quiet kind of amusement in seeing someone desperately attempt to establish authority where none exists. Whether it's a domineering partner, a controlling boss, or an overbearing family member, she treats their power plays like a poorly written script, predictable, unconvincing, and ultimately pointless. She knows exactly what they're trying to do, but instead of engaging, she lets them tire themselves out. What most fail to understand is that resistance validates control. Fighting back implies that the other person has power worth challenging. A Sigma female doesn't give them that satisfaction. She simply doesn't take the bait. And nothing is more infuriating to a control-driven person than someone who refuses to acknowledge their authority. She won't yell, won't cry, won't engage in their game of dominance. Instead, she might smirk, she might nod, but in the end she'll do exactly what she was going to do anyway. Because real power isn't in forcing submission. It's in being so unaffected that attempts at control become laughable. And once she's amused by you, you've already lost. Number 7. Emotional extortion fails because she's already disconnected. Emotional extortion only works when there's something to leverage: fear, guilt, the need for approval. But a Sigma female has already disconnected from these weaknesses. She doesn't seek validation, isn't burdened by guilt, and refuses to be chained by obligation. People who try to manipulate her quickly realize they're grasping at air. Most women are conditioned to respond to emotional pressure, whether it's guilt-tripping from family, silent treatment from a partner, or society's expectations weighing them down. A Sigma female, however, broke free from that conditioning a long time ago. She doesn't operate on emotional debts. She owes no one her time, her energy, or her compliance. If someone tries to guilt her into submission, she doesn't feel the need to defend herself. She just mentally checks out and moves on. The mistake manipulators make is assuming she cares enough to play their game. They expect her to react, to feel bad, to try to fix things. But she doesn't argue or explain herself. She sees emotional blackmail for what it is, desperation disguised as influence. And that only reinforces her decision to disengage. She's not heartless, but she is selective. She won't waste her emotions on people who try to weaponize them against her. If someone thinks they can control her through guilt, pity, or pressure, they'll soon realize the hard way. She doesn't operate on feelings. She operates on facts. And the fact is, if she's already disconnected, there's nothing left to manipulate. Number 8. Threatening a woman who can walk away is self-sabotage. Threatening a Sigma female is like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster she slips away. She isn't bound by fear, attachment, or dependency, so the moment someone tries to intimidate her, they've already lost. She won't break down. She won't negotiate. She won't even acknowledge the so-called power they think they have. She'll simply vanish, mentally, emotionally, or even physically, leaving them grasping at nothing. The mistake manipulators make is assuming she's like everyone else, afraid to lose a relationship, a job, or a social connection. But loss doesn't scare her. It liberates her. She knows her worth, which means she never feels desperate to hold on to anything that requires submission or fear. Threats don't trigger compliance in her. They trigger clarity. And once she sees someone as a liability rather than an asset, they become irrelevant. A Sigma female doesn't argue because arguments imply the other person's words have value. She doesn't plead because pleading suggests she needs them more than they need her. She doesn't explain because explanations are for those seeking approval. Instead, she does the one thing that rattles people the most. She disengages completely. And that's where the self-sabotage happens. The person trying to threaten her thought they had leverage, but all they did was show their own insecurity. They assumed she'd be afraid of consequences, but instead, she saw an opportunity to cut them loose. They thought they were forcing her into submission, but really, they were just giving her a reason to walk away faster. Number 9. Sexual withholding has no leverage. For most people, intimacy can be a powerful tool of control, something dangled like a prize or withdrawn as punishment. But for a Sigma female, it holds no leverage. She doesn't view sex as a transactional currency. Nor does she place her self-worth in the hands of anyone who thinks they can manipulate her with it. If someone attempts to use intimacy as a bargaining chip, she won't fight for it, negotiate for it, or even acknowledge it as a loss. She'll simply shrug and move on, unaffected and unimpressed. This isn't because she lacks desire. It's because she controls her own. She doesn't rely on external validation to feel complete. Nor does she attach desperation to physical connection. If someone withholds intimacy in an attempt to control her, they're only exposing their own insecurity. She sees it for what it is, a last-ditch effort to gain dominance where none exists, and nothing is less attractive to her than a person who believes power should ever be part of intimacy. She understands the difference between genuine connection and manipulation. The moment intimacy turns into a weapon, she loses all interest. She doesn't beg, doesn't play along, and certainly doesn't feel deprived. In fact, she finds the entire tactic ridiculous, because in her world, attraction isn't about power. It's about mutual respect and choice. So while others might chase, plead, or adjust their behavior to regain favor, the Sigma female does the one thing manipulators fear most. She stops caring entirely. And once that happens, there's no getting her back. Number 10. Threats only strengthen her resolve. Pressure breaks the weak, but it sharpens those who refuse to bend. A Sigma female isn't just resistant to threats, she's fueled by them. The moment someone tries to control her, it doesn't make her reconsider her stance. It makes her double down. She thrives on defying expectations, not out of rebellion, but because she refuses to be dictated by fear, manipulation, or control. People who issue threats expect submission. They assume pressure will force compliance, that intimidation will shake her resolve. But what they don't realize is that a Sigma female sees every attempt to control her as confirmation that she's on the right path. The more someone tries to cage her, the more determined she becomes to prove she doesn't need their permission to exist on her own terms. She doesn't just walk away from threats. She erases the influence of those who issue them. She doesn't argue or try to prove her worth. She lets her actions speak for themselves. Every step she takes away from control is a testament to her strength. And by the time a manipulator realizes their threats have backfired, she's already moved so far ahead that there's no reaching her. The irony? The very thing meant to break her only makes her stronger. Every failed attempt to control her is a lesson in why she can't be controlled. And for a Sigma female, nothing is more satisfying than proving, without words, without effort, that she answers to no one but herself. Control only works on those who seek permission. A Sigma female never does. Every attempt to intimidate, manipulate, or pressure her isn't a test of her strength. It's a revelation of their weakness. The moment someone tries to use threats as leverage, they expose the truth. They were never in control to begin with. A Sigma female doesn't resist power plays. She watches them collapse under their own weight. She doesn't fight for freedom. She lives in it. The world struggles to understand a woman who refuses to be ruled. Society expects compliance, relationships expect compromise, and manipulators expect fear. She gives them none of it. She answers only to herself, moves only on her own terms, and stays only where she is valued, not controlled. And the most brutal truth? She doesn't win against those who try to dominate her. She makes them irrelevant. If this resonated with you, if you see the power in walking your own path, in refusing to be controlled, in owning your independence, then this is just the beginning. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss content that speaks to your mindset. Like, comment, and share if you know someone who needs to hear this today. And let's build a community of those who don't conform, who don't bow, and who refuse to be anything but unapologetically themselves. Because the world doesn't change for those who follow. It changes for those who lead. Welcome to the mindset of the unstoppable.